The night was dark and still, the only sounds being the gentle lapping of waves against the hull of the German ship and the occasional murmur of voices from the deck above. Below, in the cramped confines of the hold, a lone figure worked quietly, his hands moving with practiced precision. Job Maseko, a South African soldier held captive by the Germans, had spent weeks planning for this moment. Using nothing but a discarded tin and a handful of stolen gunpowder, he had fashioned a makeshift bomb. Carefully, he concealed the device among the crates of ammunition and supplies. As he lit the fuse and slipped away into the shadows, his heart raced with a mixture of fear and anticipation. He knew that what he was about to do would change the course of his life forever. Explosions tore through the ship, sending flames and debris soaring into the sky. The force of the blast threw Job to the ground, but he quickly scrambled to his feet, running as fast as his legs could carry him. As he fled into the darkness, Job couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and accomplishment. Against all odds, he had struck a blow against the Third Reich, using nothing but his own ingenuity and courage. It was a moment that would go down in history, even if the world didn't yet know his name. Welcome to the Black History Buff podcast. I'm your host, King Carouse, and today we're diving into the incredible story of Job Maseko, the South African soldier who single-handedly destroyed a German ship during World War II. Before we get into today's episode, I just want to say a huge thank you to my supporters on Patreon and Steady, without whom I wouldn't be able to make this show or produce any of my social media content. Over at Patreon, for free, you'll gain access to hundreds of social media posts as well as ad-free versions of the podcast, behind-the-scenes updates, voting rights, and access to my best work first. Look, social media isn't being very social right now, so if you want to follow my work and keep up to date in a way you can control, come and join me on Patreon for free. Okay, with that said, now, on with the show. Did you know that the first shot fired by the British Army during the First World War wasn't on the Western Front, but in the tiny West African country of Togo? It happened just 3 days after Britain declared war on Germany in 1914. When we think of World War I and II, our minds often turn to the battles fought in Europe and the Pacific. But there's a crucial aspect of these global conflicts that's often overlooked: the role of African colonial soldiers and auxiliaries. Over 1 million African men and women served in the world wars, fighting and laboring for their colonizers across several continents. Yet their experiences and sacrifices are often given short shrift in the endless books, articles, and films about these wars. In the early 1900s, the idea of arming and fighting alongside Africans was abhorrent to colonial powers, who viewed them as inferior. When Africans were enlisted, it was primarily for non-combat roles like labor and supply transport. In tropical Africa, military campaigns relied on human carriers, including women and children, to haul supplies in areas where draft animals couldn't survive. But as the wars escalated, colonial armies began to expand and adapt, and by 1915, Indian and African troops were fighting on the Western Front. In East Africa, over 1 million carriers were employed from 1914 to 1918, and when World War II erupted, colonial forces rapidly grew into modern fighting units with over 1 million Africans in uniform. However, many of these soldiers were tricked or coerced into service. Tribal chiefs were compelled to provide recruits by any means necessary. Some men were lured by the promise of adventure and a steady wage. Others were forced into the army against their will. For the recruits, military life was a jarring introduction to an unfamiliar world of tarmac roads, canned foods, and modern weapons. Brutal punishments were meted out for any perceived disobedience or incomprehension. Institutionalized racism and oppression were rampant, with African soldiers treated as lesser than their white counterparts. It was against this backdrop of exploitation and injustice that Job Maseko began his military career. Job Maseko was born in 1917 in Springs, a town near Johannesburg, South Africa. Growing up in a country plagued by racial inequality, Job witnessed firsthand injustices faced by black South Africans. Despite the challenges, he remained determined to make a difference.
It's very difficult to explain what it was like growing up in apartheid South Africa to someone who doesn't have that experience. There were soldiers in our township all the time. Vehicles parked 100 meters from our house, from the time that we woke up in the morning to the time that we went to bed at night. Young white men walk around our township with very big guns, and that is really what apartheid was.
When World War II broke out, Job, like many young men of his generation, saw an opportunity to serve his country and fight for a better future. In 1940, he joined the Southern African Native Military Corps, a unit composed entirely of black soldiers. He was among the roughly 80,000 black South Africans who underwent basic training before being sent to North Africa as part of the Native Military Corps.
More Springboks trek north. Men from all parts of the Union parade before the Prime Minister, Field Marshal Smuts, prior to leaving their native soil to join their comrades already in the battle zones. The Germans, with all their heel-clicking, goose-stepping and please-teacher salutes, can't produce soldiers like the men of South Africa. Rugged, tough and fighting fit, the Springboks are on their way to the troop trains, which are to carry them to the port of embarkation. At the station, there are last-minute goodbyes to near and dear ones. Partings are always sad, but it's for the liberty and happiness of their families that these men are leaving.
The NMC was a non-combatant force attached to white South African units as labourers, the purpose of which was to maximise the white service members in combat instead of fulfilling non-combatant roles and duties. As for Job, he was tasked to be a stretcher bearer in North Africa. His task was to help transport wounded soldiers away from the battlefield amongst hails of bullets. The reality of life in the segregated military was far from the ideal of equality and fairness. As a Corporal Philip Melopi recalls, "We were not given guns. Instead, we were given asingais and knockberries. The white soldiers were armed with guns. We were told that the enemy was not going to reach us." Despite the discrimination and lack of proper equipment, Job and his fellow soldiers remained committed to the cause. They underwent rigorous training, learning the skills necessary to serve as stretcher bearers, drivers and labourers in support of the war effort. In 1941, Job's unit was deployed to North Africa to fight against the German and Italian forces. There, they faced not only the dangers of combat, but also the harsh realities of the desert environment. "We dug trenches in the sand," remembered Private Solomon Majola. "We slept in the trenches. We were always ready for the enemy." The contributions of African soldiers like Job were crucial to the Allied war effort. However, their sacrifices were often overlooked and their treatment remained unequal. "We fought for the liberation of Europe," lamented Senegalese soldier and future poet Leopold Senghor. "But we were not free in our own countries." The ultimate injustice came in 1942 during the Battle of Tobruk, when Job's unit was captured by the Germans and taken to a prisoner of war camp in Libya. There, the African POWs faced even harsher conditions and treatment than they had endured in the military. "The Germans didn't treat us like soldiers," recalled one African POW. "They treated us like animals. We were beaten, starved, and forced to work in the hot sun for hours on end." It was in this environment of extreme hardship and cruelty that Job's resolve to fight back crystallized. As he witnessed the suffering of his fellow prisoners and experienced the brutality of his captors firsthand, he knew he could no longer remain passive. The time had come to take action.
Say goodbye to your credit card rewards. Greedy corporate mega stores, led by Walmart and Target, are pushing for a law in Congress to take away your hard-earned cash back and travel points to line their pockets. The Durbin-Marshall credit card bill would enact harmful credit card routing mandates that would end credit card rewards as we know it. If you love your credit card rewards, tell your lawmakers, hands off my rewards. Tell them to oppose the Durbin-Marshall credit card bill.
O'Reilly. Check engine light on? Take the guesswork out of your check engine light with O'Reilly Veriscan. It's free and provides a report with solutions based on over 650 million vehicle scans verified by ASE certified master technicians. And if you need help, we can recommend a shop for you. Ask for O'Reilly Veriscan today.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Imprisoned in the POW camp, Job Maseko faced unimaginable hardships. The German guards treated the African prisoners with particular cruelty, subjecting them to harsh labor and punishment. Food was scarce and the living conditions were deplorable. But despite the adversity, Job's resolve to fight back only grew stronger. As the weeks dragged on, Job began to notice a pattern in the camp's routine. Every few days, the Germans would force a group of prisoners to load supplies and ammunition onto a ship in the nearby harbour. It was during one of these loading details that Job saw his chance to strike a blow against the enemy. Over the next few weeks, Job carefully planned this act of sabotage. He collected scraps of metal and discarded ammunition, hiding them away in the corners of the camp. In the dead of night, he worked tirelessly to fashion a makeshift bomb, using nothing but a tin can, a fuse made from scavenged cloth, and a handful of stolen gunpowder. The day of the attack arrived, and Job was once again assigned to the loading detail. As he carried crates of ammunition onto the German ship, he carefully concealed his bomb amongst the cargo. With each step, his heart raced faster, knowing that the slightest misstep could lead to disaster. Finally, the moment of truth arrived. As the last crate was loaded, Job lit the fuse of his makeshift bomb and slipped away from the ship, blending in with the other prisoners. Seconds ticked by like hours as he waited for the explosion, his breath caught in his throat. The blast, when it came, was deafening. Flames erupted from the ship's hull and debris rained down onto the harbour. Chaos broke out as German soldiers rushed to the scene, shouting orders and searching for the saboteur. Amidst the confusion, Job made his escape, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. He knew that his actions could have consequences, but he also knew he had struck a powerful blow for freedom and justice. Job's courage and ingenuity had set the stage for a remarkable turn of events. But as we'll see in the next part of our story, his battle was not just against the Germans, but against a system that valued him less than his white counterparts. Job's act of sabotage, though small in the grand scheme of the war, was a testament to the unbreakable spirit of resistance that burned within him and so many other African soldiers. It was a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming odds, one person's courage and determination could make a difference. In the days that followed, the German guards launched a furious manhunt for the saboteur, but Job, in the commotion of the explosion, had escaped. Job trekked through the harsh conditions of the desert for 3 weeks before eventually reaching freedom in Egypt's El Alamein. He had liberated himself. When Job returned to South Africa after the war, he hoped his sacrifices and bravery would be recognized and that he would be able to build a better life for himself and his family. However, the reality he faced was far different. Like many other African veterans, Job found himself returning to a country still deeply entrenched in apartheid and racial discrimination. Despite his service to the nation, he was treated as a second-class citizen, denied the same rights and opportunities as his white counterparts. About 80,000 black South Africans served in the Native Military Corps. After the war, they were given bicycles and boots, and sometimes a suit as a reward. Meanwhile, the white soldiers received housing and land. In the years following the war, Job struggled to find steady employment and provide for his family. The skills he had acquired in the military were of little use in a society that systematically excluded and marginalized black South Africans. In a cruel twist of fate, when Job's commanding officer recommended him for a military medal, the highest honor for bravery in the British and Commonwealth Armed Forces, the recommendation was downgraded to a lesser award. The reason? He was black. As a black soldier, Job was not eligible for the same recognition as his white counterparts. This was the stark reality that Job and many African veterans found themselves facing upon their return home. They weren't rewarded, acknowledged, or respected by the society they had returned to. The promises of equality and fair treatment that had been made during the war quickly evaporated in the face of entrenched racism and discrimination. Over time, Job became disillusioned and bitter. He turned to alcohol to cope with his frustration and despair. Suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder and depression, he eventually lost contact with his family and friends. War hero Lance Corporal Job Maseko died a poor man in 1952, struck by a train in a tragic accident aged just 36. His death was barely noticed by the authorities or the media, and his medal was stolen from his widow's home shortly after his funeral. Job's story is one of courage, sacrifice, and the enduring spirit of resistance in the face of oppression. As we reflect on his life and the lives of so many other African soldiers who fought in World War II, we're left with a powerful question. What can we learn from their experiences, and how can we honor their legacy? When I was researching the life of Job, I was moved to tears several times. As I learned about the hardships these men faced, the lives that led them into combat, the families they left behind, something inside me just broke. Imagine leaving one oppressive environment only to find yourself in another. Then, as a prisoner of war, your conditions deteriorate even further. And when you finally return home, a decorated war hero, you're thrust straight back into the same oppressive system you left behind. This was the reality for countless African soldiers, including Job. It's so easy to glorify war, to see it as a simple story of good versus evil, and to ignore the lives that are shattered in the process. The sons who will never have children, the children who will never see their fathers and mothers again, the communities ripped apart, all in the name of empire building. Reading about the daily indignities they endured just weighed heavily on my soul. The constant grind of insult after insult, the belief that you're serving your people, that this is an opportunity to improve your life and prove your worth, only to end up digging ditches. To be segregated even in death by oppressive forces that hate you for no reason other than the fact that you exist on the same earth as them is just heartbreaking. There was no escape from it. Enemy, ally, home, it was all the same end result. What I want anyone listening to this episode to do is to put some respect on the names of all the African, South Asian, Caribbean, and African American soldiers who fought, died, and survived World War I and II. Because if we don't, who will? When it comes to liberty and freedom, the same fights that took place in 1918 and 1939 are still being fought today. We have conflicts all over the world right now, battles for human rights and equalities that remain unwon. And in my opinion, they'll remain so until we stop seeing agendas and start recognizing the humanity and history that each of us carries within. I, you, we are the manifested dreams of our ancestors. I, for one, intend to try to live up to those dreams.
Free Palestine!
We will
justice, you say how.
We want justice, you say how.
Free, free Palestine.
Free, free Palestine is a crime.
You have been listening to King Carouse, and this is the Black History Buff podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode and want to support the creation of more, or if you just want to know more about what I'm doing and why, come and join me over at Patreon, where you can join and access my best work for free. Why Patreon? Well, to be honest, I'm tired of begging algorithms to share these stories with people. So, if you come and join me on Patreon, I know that the people who want these stories will get these stories. Anyway, that's enough from me. Until next time, stay safe, be sweet, share generously with the people you meet, and remember, Black history is world history.
Genocide. They're just blowing up civilians.
Well, me as a Black American, I experience violence and oppression from a police force that's trained by the Israeli army, that's killing Palestinian children, dropping bombs on Palestinian hospitals as they suffer with terrible injuries from white phosphorus without any anesthetics or pain medication.
Why Israel have to get out of Palestine and they leave the whole land to Palestinian people, not only Gaza, all Palestine. They have to leave Palestine.
Just to support the Palestinian people, to be here for them. Honestly, so many innocent people died. It's disgusting to see this be okay. To see the people that we call our brothers and sisters dying every day.
Palestinians need their voices to be heard because we are people and we are being occupied. And this genocide and ethnic cleansing is our day-to-day lives. This is not just now. This is not just tomorrow. This has been going on for years, for 75 damn years, and we're done. Enough is enough. The lies need to stop. The killing needs to stop.
Hey y'all, Darius Rucker here. You know, a lot of people ask me, what inspires your music? And one of the big things is a strong sense of place. That's why I love my home state of South Carolina and want to share the awesome things it has to offer. From the beautiful mountains down to the sunny coast, it's got it all. Not to mention two of my personal favorites, great golf and amazing food. Come see why I love this place. Visit discoversouthcarolina.com.